Boom, and we're live. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Men with Purpose, where we're having conscious conversations with other men's work facilitators around masculinity, the field of men's work, what is like to be a man today, what is a man in general, masculinity, and everything in between. Today, I'm joined by Justin Lee. Justin is the founder of Soulful Intimacy and Soulful Man. He's a relationship and men's coach. He's trained in various modalities from conscious relating to breath work to embodied movement and sacred sexuality. He's been part of leading intentional communities, men's circles, as well as workshops across the globe. With that being said, I'm incredibly grateful, Justin, for being here. Thank you very much.
Happy to be here as well, Paul.
Thank you, sir. I like to start these podcasts with just a check-in, just to taking a deep breath and seeing what's present for you, what's your truth. So yeah, let's do that. What's present for you, brother?
Yeah, what's present? Definitely feel some fuzziness in my stomach. Been touching in with my inner child a little bit last little bit of time, and yeah, I didn't sleep as well last night. So it's about 4 p.m. where I'm at, so I'm starting to feel that. But besides that, yeah, there's generally I'm in a good place, which is something to say compared to how things have been this year. So grateful to be seemingly ending the year on a positive note. So
Oh, that's great. I can relate to some of the things you've said. I mean, I had a little bit better sleep than sounds like by the sound of it you maybe didn't have. What's present for me is I'm incredibly grateful. Grateful to be doing this interview, to be starting the weekend in such a way to, what's been a really hectic week for me. So these conversations a little bit like active meditation for me to be able to sync up with someone and kind of get on the same vibes or not. I don't know, but for the most part, that's kind of been my experience. All right, so we talk about a lot of things, which I'm really eager to get into. Could we start with maybe your story? How did you get on this conscious path of learning and spirituality, sexuality, men's work? How did everything start for you?
yeah, it's such a question because like there's so much to be said.
Mm-mm.
I think that the simplest answer is what led me towards men's work was a desire for women. Yeah, it was about, gosh, now about 12 years ago that I first went into, technically it was a men's meeting. I wouldn't say it was a men's circle, but it was a men's meeting that was more based around, getting women and connecting in that way. And really that was my first experience being in a room with other men where it felt good. It felt good. It felt positive. There was support, and there was, all those elements that you and I know are, very intrinsic to men's work.
Mm.
And it wasn't until maybe a couple of years later that I really started getting involved with, I'll say more of the, let's say, conscious men's work, and yeah, but I still think it's funny at times when I think back and think about my first real introduction to brotherhood and connection with other men, and really, that experience of rubbing against each other to make each other sharper, was through trying to get women, trying to get connection, and yeah, I definitely stayed in that for a couple of years. Can't say I was super adept at pickup, but it was a very good period of time for me. I learned a lot about just myself. You know, as many negatives as pickup may have, it definitely has some positives in the sense that, at least for someone like myself, I gained a lot of confidence. I gained the ability to, yeah, I really started to be able to just be in a room and be comfortable and just have that be the experience instead of always being in my head around, where's my status? What do I need to say? Who do I need to
Mm.
be friends with? I can't
Yeah.
just be standing here by myself. What do I do? How does this work?
Mm.
And it's really been a process of, coming into my body and really getting grounded into, yeah, my personal experience in each moment. And a lot of that came through, um, in my 30s, I moved from Denver to San Diego, and there's a beautiful tantra slash polyamory community over there. And just being in that field of people who were and had been already for decades have been living this kind of conscious, heartful, connected lifestyle, and to be able to experience that and to live and to love within that community for a few years, it really it really gave me a vision of what life and love could be like.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of I'll say that's one version of how I ended up here.
Wow, there's so many things I want to unpack there. I'm really glad. I want to also talk about the community, polyamory, and tantra community that you're in. Before we get to that, I want to really point out something that really stuck with me. What you said about conscious men's work, because there is kind of notion similar to you. I also got into pickup, and I wouldn't say the dark arts, but sometimes there is a bit of a connotation because it's very manipulative and it's driven by ulterior motives, let's say. I also got into that. That's how I kind of started, how to be an alpha male, and then led me to pickup, which I didn't really resonate that much. But it seems like for all the drama, for all the negative connotations related to that, there is, at times it felt like a little bit like mini rites of passage, going out there and in social dynamics, being by yourself or with someone else, approaching women. That takes a lot of courage, right? It's incredibly, people, specifically men that are actually listening to this, would know how difficult something like this is to go night out. And if you're a little bit like me, a little bit extremist, um but yeah, I want to make a distinction between pickup and becoming better with women versus men's work. I think one is a lot more foundational, whereas at least from my experience, I'm also curious to know what was it like for you as well. Pickup was, for me, it was a little bit more forced, and it was a little around building techniques and kind of using them as a set of crutches or supporting wheels, versus men's work. One thing is leading into the other, in my opinion. You don't need that many techniques if you're grounded, if you're present, you know what your purpose is, etc., etc. Maybe that's my idealistic rather point of view, but was that a similar thing for you, or what was that like?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I definitely see it being similar.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I definitely can see there's a big difference between those two worlds. And yeah, I always found pickup to be a little bit weird, and the way I look at it now, I mean, pickup today, I actually don't know what's happening in that industry right now. I have no clue, right? It's
Neither.
super distanced from it at this point. But that is to say that it is an industry, which to me I think points to one of the biggest shadows of the pickup industry, which is that it's an industry, and I say industry in the sense that it's something that is designed to make money, right? It is an industry,
Mm.
which is to say that so much of pickup, and I think this is why it kind of gives off a little bit like an ick vibe, is because so much of it is geared towards speaking to our fears, our doubts, our insecurities, and so much of the marketing is literally exactly designed to pick on those points and to make a man feel less than the ideal that's being presented, like the alpha male.
Yes.
And if I'm a man who's experiencing this dynamic, and if I'm not solid, or if I don't have my inner world kind of established, it's very easy for me to fall into that, right? And
Mm.
if someone says, "Hey, pay me $500 or pay me X amount of dollars and you'll get good at women," of course I'm going to pay for that.
Right. You're
Take my
21
money,
year old. Yeah, exactly.
right?
Mm.
So I see the pickup industry as being, really good in some ways.
Nope. I think we lost you.
Uh, yeah, I see the pickup industry being really good in some ways, and at the same time, I feel the challenge with it is that it's so much of it is rooted in the shadow of manipulation and basically trying to sell things to people, whether they actually
Mm.
need it or not. And I think that's what's important is that, you know, do men actually need pickup? Do they need to learn how to get women? Let's say. I mean, the answer is probably yes. We all could get better at that skill,
Mm.
but I think you touched on it before. Is that actually where men could or should be putting their time? And is it the best use of their time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, in some ways, I think it is. For someone who's in their 20s, who's got that energy, like, you know, I say this gently, there's nuance here, and, I don't want to be raising the patriarchy flag here, but there's something I think meaningful for a younger man to explore
Mm.
and to stretch and to see what it is like to have this body and to interact with people, many different people. And as we
Yeah.
evolve and we grow, right, there's just all these different experiences that we can have, we can choose to not have, and all this stuff. And
Mm.
I think there's a lot of value in men. For some people won't like this phrase, but getting it out of their system a little bit,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Now, there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of shadow to that as well, because then
Yeah.
that definitely touches on how are we just using women to try to get this thing? That's
Mm-hmm.
not so
Mm-hmm.
great.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm yeah. That's to say again, there's a lot of nuance, so I don't
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
don't want to get too much hate around what I just said.
Mm. Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
but these days I'm really, one of the things I really try to integrate for myself is that very rarely are things black and very very rarely are things this
Mm.
or that, right?
Yeah.
It's usually a combination of two. And the question that I've really found as I've evolved is it possible to hold both things at the same time,
Yeah. Holding paradox together, right? And still
right?
making a decision. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it's really that question, right? It's like, can I hold two paradoxes at the same time, or a
Mm-hmm.
paradox, and then can I still be effective? Can I still make decisions from that? Can I still
Mm.
find my way within that? And that is the I mean, to me, that's mastery, right? That's
I was
integration.
about to say the same word. To use
Yeah,
the same word. Wow.
yeah. Ooh.
Um, I think, booyah. Um, I want to preface this again by saying that we're not kind of, shitting on one particular industry. Maybe shitting is a very strong word, but um, not to say that it is a bad thing or something like this. But yesterday I had a conversation with Soma Miller from The Essential Man. Shout out to him. Great, great guy. So he's kind of finishing towards the end of the episode. He said similar thing, right? People should be aware that there is a lot of marketeers preying on their traumas, their insecurities, especially you're a 21-year-old kid, playing computer games, no social skills whatsoever. I've been there. That's exactly me, like 10 years ago. It's very easy to fall prey to something like this. So again, one thing to like you said is very nuanced. There is no black and white, especially in a polarized culture today. If you're not with me, you're against me, and that's like no, like that's not the way to do things, right? It's a very mature perspective is what I'm trying to get to, not to kind of um talk too much about this, but yeah, I do definitely see men's work is a little bit more conscious approach to that, which by default you get women as a result because you're more grounded and all these kind of things. Whereas pickup, at least from my experience, I have no idea what's happening right now. I'm not saying it's completely bad, just sharing our opinions here. um is a little bit more yeah, on the shadow side. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
All right, so wow, okay, this is getting really interesting. So you yeah, nice, I like it. All right, so you went to San Diego, and you're in this conscious community, tantric community. I think a lot of men actually have fantasies for something like this, or at least from what I've heard, they're a little bit interested into that. They're kind of, imagining all sorts of crazy stories. Without getting into too much detail, or getting into detail as much as you're comfortable, what was that experience like for you? What was some of the lessons that you learned in that?
Hmm. I would say the most important lesson, because there's obviously a lot of things I learned, but I'd say the most essential lesson I learned was how many different ways that we can love, and how. So the reason why I say that is, so one of the aspects of the community was how old the community was. So unlike yourself or myself, where we've kind of done a little bit of expatting, and we've kind of just been in different areas where there isn't as much rooting, you know, uh, in that community, it was San Diego. So there were people that had been part of that community for like 10, 20 years,
Wow.
right? So there was a
Wow.
lot of story, there was a lot of experience that that this group of people had shared together over a long period of time. And so through that, again, Tantra polyamory community, there were a lot of different kind of dynamics people were living and loving in. And essentially what I experienced and what the biggest lesson was seeing how love can evolve,
Mm.
seeing how men and women and men and men and women, right, all that can have a relationship and not be in a relationship and still be loving towards each other. And that was revolutionary for me because everything that I've been exposed to before, which was basically everything on TV
Mm.
and the media, says that when relationships get hard or things are difficult or when things end, it's like there's only one way that goes, which is like misery for everyone involved.
Mm.
And what I experienced in this community, for myself directly and also just within my surroundings, was people that were somehow able to, with challenge, it wasn't easy all the time, but somehow able to return to love
Mm.
and to continually step into this knowing that as humans we are here to love and we're here to connect and we're here to support, and as it's been said, we're all here to walk each other home.
Wow.
And to really experience that and really to see it right in that radically changed who I am on the inside.
Mm.
Dramatically, yeah, it's a lot of different areas because again, it broke my model of what was possible, which
Mm.
was essentially either the Disneyland model or the sitcom model, right? Those are basically the two kind of
Nothing in between. Yeah.
nothing in between, right? This was kind of what I was working with in my 20s, right? It
Wow.
was it was this or this, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we can see obviously neither of these are actually real, like fully, right? There's aspects of it that are in reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that process of just experiencing that really opened me up, and from that came lessons of surrender, lessons of vulnerability, of authenticity, of communication, all these kind of things that came along the way. But yeah, it really was. Oh goodness, I feel so cliche saying this, but like, yeah, it really was love. That was the thing that I learned. How you know yeah, how as humans it can look and it can be so many different ways, and that we really get to create it, you know, based off each individual connection and dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of felt similar thing when, I to digress for a little bit, I did a psychedelic experience with like LSD for the first time in Chiang Mai, maybe a couple years ago, right about the time that I actually visited one of the men's circles you're organizing. Anyway, so the whole experience for me, the whole psychedelic experience was that everything, once you peel the layers of the onion, is really love. Love is the source for everything. And this sounds a little bit like woo and out there like John Lennon, but it does come from a very different perspective, right? It's coming. All of this is rooted in actual experience rather than listening to it and they, oh yeah, love is the answer, bro. Like it's totally different. So people very quick people are very quick to judge, I think, myself included. I'm really trying to kind of be very conscious and aware of that. But when we say love in this context, it's coming from a very different point of experience, and I think I'm able to I like to think I'm able to relate to what you're saying. So wow. Yesterday, also because it's very fresh, this episode, someone was actually talking about creating communities and how we've really lost that. So to hear you go to San Diego and be part of something that's lasted the test of time for what, 20, 30 years. I'm not sure if that's a long period of time, but it seems like it is for something like this to coexist. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what happened afterwards? You present. I'm sure there was very uh, at times things were really difficult, right? Especially with the surrender, and you're probably working through your things as everybody else, I'd imagine. At what point did you say, okay, I think I had enough in this community and I'm ready to move on, or it kind of happened very naturally for you?
It's a good question. It happened fairly naturally.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I think it's important to note that during this time when I moved to San Diego, one of the first things that I was introduced to or invited into was a room with 15 other men. And we essentially started a men's group with the idea of, do you know who David D'Angelo is?
Come on, man. Quick shot.
Oh man, it's
Dude,
so funny.
he is the godfather
Um,
of this. Like I have him as like a informal mentor. Like I've downloaded all of his programs illegally by I should totally confess here. And I've always dreamed like, okay, I'm gonna meet this guy once and I'm gonna pay him like $50,000 all at once because I downloaded all of his programs and consumed everything. Yeah. For people who don't know, David D'Angelo is
mm,
kind of the pen name for a guy called Eben Pagan. He's like a marketer, but before he kind of started in this pickup and then moved into more how to become a better man, which I think somewhat influenced this whole field of men's work. At least this is my kind of
mm,
experience, if you will. But man, this is amazing. Please
mm.
carry on.
Yeah, yeah. I like your description of David D'Angelo. To me, he was really, I think, as he grew. This is maybe like 10 years ago, kind of the time frame, right?
2000
I think,
and early 2006, 7, something like this. At
yeah,
least
something like
that's
that. Yeah,
maybe
it
a little
almost
bit
seemed,
more, but yeah.
mm, yeah, it almost seemed like as he evolved, the industry evolved also, which was really fascinating, and it kind of led into a lot. Like I this is kind of not the point, but yeah, I kind of seen that as he grew into more of like, hey, let's be better men, not just about getting women. I'd noticed a lot of other people started following him as well, which is
Totally,
great because now
totally
we have
agree.
more, you know, yeah, more lighthouses in the world. So
Mm.
I digress. So here's
No.
another new.
That's great. That's like happy to dive into this as well. Like,
Yeah, yeah. So I mentioned David D'Angelo because the other side of it was we had David Data,
mm.
right? So we started this men's group in San Diego with the idea of combining. Hey, how do we bring in David D'Angelo while also bringing David Data and bringing in like creating like like the ultimate man, right? That was the idea. Um, I mentioned that simply to say that that was a cornerstone for me throughout this entire period of time as I was in that when I was engaging with that community. So it was so valuable, and I think this is really one of the things that helped me integrate a lot of the experiences I had within the community was because I always had a circle of men I could turn to
Mm.
in a safe place where I could do some of the work that as a man I needed to do with other men.
Mm.
Or at least that's the way it seemed, and probably is the case. Um, and so that was a big evolution as well. And all that, I guess, like both kind of communities, led me to a lot more experience with my body. Obviously connecting with others, but also I got a lot more. That was actually my first introduction to yoga. You know, doing the yoga thing, got involved with hatha yoga, tantra yoga, some kundalini stuff. Got introduced in a more intentional way, psychedelics, and yeah, all that essentially led to me being very being in a very open place. This is about 6 years ago, and a friend of mine had a bright idea where like I had just transitioned from a relationship, and so had some other people in our community about the same age. We had this bright idea: we're going to move to the Bay Area, to Northern California, and rent a big house and start doing workshops and start doing all this stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that summer, my friend called me up and said, "Hey, guess what?" I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Moving to Bali." So
Okay.
so that led me to Bali, and that's really what led me here to Southeast Asia, to this chapter. And it's really been it's really been a really interesting chapter for me, because you know maybe you felt this as well, but for me, when I stepped into Southeast Asia specifically, especially, what I experienced was what I'll describe a permission to experience and be and embody my feminine
Mm.
that I did not experience when I was in the West.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I'm not saying that this is like an absolute. This is just my personal experience of it. And from that, the last few years has really been an exploration of that. Of
Mhm.
how do we integrate the masculine aspects of us while also bringing in the feminine sides of us, and how do we
Mhm.
integrate those pieces for wholeness? Um,
Mhm. Wow. I think
yeah,
people that don't know, I actually met Justin as I was preparing for this episode. I think roughly 2 years ago is where I actually visited your men's circle in Chiang Mai in Thailand, Southeast Asia. And that kind of led me into this kind of really getting more involved in organizing men's circles and doing all that type of stuff. So yeah, now you kind of reached out to me by saying, yeah, I was kind of doing this kind of reflection, and you came to mind, and this kind of coincided everything. So the universe knows what she's doing, man. um
yeah,
can you elaborate a little bit more about, you said connecting to your feminine? Can you put a little bit more context for people around about that?
yeah. You know, I guess I don't want to get too much into like the woo woo and all that stuff like that.
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
You know, it's simply to say, and maybe some of your listeners have heard this before, the idea that as a human, not as a man, not as a woman, but as a human, I have masculine and feminine aspects. Um, to me, the way I look at masculinity and femininity is that the they're simply one half of the other of the same coin. I think that's
Mm-hmm,
I can
mm-hmm,
say it
mm-hmm.
that way, right?
Anima and animus, right, as Carl Jung said.
Yeah, yeah, all that. And you know, the way I look at it is this: is I try to be objective about it,
Mm.
in the sense that we can call it like we're calling this idea of masculinity because our minds and our brains want to have a label to know what it is, to describe it, to share it, and that function of being human. And at the same time, it's just a name, right? It's just masculinity. That's just a name we're just calling this thing.
A label,
That to
yeah.
Yeah, that again to me is simply the other half of something.
Mm-hmm.
So like the yin and yang symbol, right? You know, it's simply that there's two halves. There is up and there's down, right? There's this and there's that, and there appears, although there's nuance to this, it appears that generally speaking, there are humans in what's appear to be more male bodies, and humans that appear to be in more female bodies.
Mm.
And you know, and within that dance, there's also it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one because it seems like there's paradox, and there is. At the same time, it can be super simple, right? It's simply
Mm.
that there are two parts of me,
Mm-hmm.
right? There is the masculine, there's the feminine. I could even just say that there are two parts. There are two halves. There's a part that
Mm-hmm.
seems to be like this, and there's a part that seems to be like this. Now we happen to call this feminine, we happen to call this masculine, but really to me, ultimately, as a man and as a person, really as a human, is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
finding that balance, and not necessarily in every single moment. right? Which is to say that there are some periods of time, there are some moments, but also there are some periods of time where maybe it's beneficial for me as a human, right? It could be a male or female, but it could be beneficial for me to use more of my masculine or use more of the feminine qualities.
Mhm.
And it's simply me being present with what's happening in the moment, being conscious about what I'm bringing out and how I'm engaging with what is, and always with this sense of coming back to balance. Whatever that is in each moment, right? It's gonna be different for each moment, different for each person. But the my ascendant is Libra, so I'm all about balance. I'm all about this thing. But it really is the idea that I really like to work with these days is almost like being on a surfboard.
Mm.
And that's life.
It's a good metaphor. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The thing is moving. There's things happening all the time, and it can seem like I'm not doing much, but what's actually happening is I'm finding my balance
Mm-hmm.
in every single moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's yeah. And again, coming back to that masculine and feminine side, there's a lot of potency in being able to access both,
Yeah.
and when appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Listening to this, I can draw correlations to my personal story. At times, I was very much into my feminine side, if you will. Where I was growing up, my mother was a choreographer, so I was naturally around a lot of women, and my kind of coping mechanism for this was to be kind of I won't say the class clown, but to be drawing attention and just being surrounded by a lot of women, which naturally made me very comfortable being around that. It wasn't up until a later stage in my life where I fell in love in a relationship, and that's when I realized, wow, okay, my ways of being and kind of moving through this flying rock through space isn't gonna help me with this woman. Essentially, I was a 21 or 22-year-old boy at the time. So I really had to start again exploring a little bit more into my masculine side and masculine traits and qualities and purpose and direction, etc., etc. So
Mm.
I do really resonate with what you're saying, that it's like a board. It's a very um, fine dance. It's a whenever you're trying to kind of balance those two. And
Yeah.
this is not to say that you always, I've been into that like constant warrior mode. Every obstacle I see in front of me is a wall that I need to go through. There is no other way. But, having this ability, again, it's a bit of a paradox, but the true master is being able to hold it both within you and still being able to move forward and make decisions. Um, is quite a skill to have. It's quite a skill, but I definitely see the benefits of this kind of approach or thinking, I'd say.
Mhm. Yeah, and just to expound upon that just a little bit more,
Mm.
and I think you touched on it, is that it's important to recognize that as people, right, men
Yeah,
and women,
yeah.
but specifically with men, is that we're all starting out based off our upbringing, our people that are around us, our siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're all starting out with a different level of, let's say, we're on a we're somewhere on this spectrum between masculine and feminine, and that's kind of like it's just what it is, right? It's like it's
Yeah.
someone like you said is brought up in a household where there's a lot of women, right? They're just gonna naturally have more of a feminine, you know, flavor to
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not good or bad, right? But it's important, and this is one of the things that I really view as very important about men's work is that it cannot be one size fits all.
Mm. It's a good point.
Yeah, because I mean, not only just on a very basic level do we have all different experiences, but as men, we have a vast amount of experiences and differences in experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and what works for me is not going to work for you because what you're going to need, your medicine is going to be slightly different from mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think especially, again, drawing kind of correlations to my personal story, but also some of the guests that I've interviewed, as children, we tend to kind of receive traumas, maybe from childhood, from parents, sometimes unintentionally. And I'm not talking about some really crazy traumas, although in some cases that may be the case. But a lot of these things that are happening, and we kind of unknowingly continue to carry those traumas and this all this kind of baggage, if you will, throughout
Mm,
life. So again, not one size fits all. I think men's work in and of itself is incredibly beneficial, at least has really drastically changed my life. And I don't say this lightheartedly for a lot of things. But yeah, realizing that you're moving towards what Carl Jung said, this individuation, where you as an individual become whole, integrating your anima and animus, masculine, feminine, your conscious side as well as your shadow side is incredibly important. And this is a journey. You know, you might resonate with men's work for a couple of years and then something else kind of comes up. So it's a never-ending dance, right? It's a never-ending balance, like you said. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of men from not even I just see it a lot is they're totally unaware of these traumas that have happened, that they tend to kind of have the shadow side keep projecting onto other men, other women, and this is why I think this field of work will hopefully become more and more popular and is going to have a more and more impact on other human beings, because this is, I think, beneficial for both men and women, because it's a whole, right? You can't, one cannot go without the other.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now your work right now, I know you were organizing these men's circles in Chiang Mai, and then we kind of lost touch. I went back to Europe. Everything kind of exploded with this whole pandemic. Yeah. Do you still continue leading men's circles? Because I know you're very much also involved into relationship coaching as well. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, specifically right now, in times of COVID, not really holding men's circles, at least not in person. So that's a thing. Yeah, and that definitely is still a passion of mine. We'll see how that unfolds. There's obviously the online aspect, and that may be something that we'll be, I'm going to give more attention to in the new year. Yeah, yeah, it's funny. It's been a period of time since we last talked. We
Yes.
last caught up. Yeah, and there's definitely been some evolutions. During that I was very, when we met, I was very much into men's work, and that shifted over time. That shifted a little bit towards me working essentially with humans, right? Providing, conscious relationship guidance for, for men and women. And, over this year, with all the COVIDness and just a lot of, yeah, I had some personal shakeups, let's say, and it's really brought me back to, I'll say a seat of power around men's work, and seeing that this is really a, rekindling my spark towards this after having, after a time away that I think I needed. I think I think the version of men's work that I was doing before was probably, yeah, was a little bit less integrated. It was probably a little bit more forced than it was present with, what's possible and, what's alive for myself in the moment.
It's interesting you say this, and again, I'm totally honor your truth. When I visited your men's circle, it felt very, very natural. I mean, I know at the time I think you're dealing with some personal things, but I felt really understood there when we sat down and you kind of facilitated everything for everybody. I felt incredibly grounded. Like, oh wow, this guy actually really understands and really listens. So did everybody else who was present at the time. So, wow, for me to hear you say that right now, I'm like, wow, okay, things have moved to the next level for you then. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, wow. And where does the conscious relating come into this? Because you did mention that you work with humans, both men and women. Is this around relationships per se, or is it just really very individualized for whatever the actual person needs?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess practically, I'm not so much doing couples work, as it were, and you know, really, what I found and where I find a lot more of my excitement is these days is the inner relationship. Because even for most of us, even right now, if someone says relationship, for most people, the immediate thought is someone else, right? It's my connection with another person, my relationship with them, right? And that's great, right? We're humans. We love connection. It's what we're all about. And at the same time, and I think this has been a thread that we've seen through our conversation, is that if a person isn't known to themselves, if I don't actually know who I am, if I don't have a sense of what's happening here and a sense of inner relationship, knowing where, if I don't have an inner dialogue with myself, if I can't ask myself questions and get some have some dialogue happening here and some understanding and some access to a wisdom that is not from here, but is much deeper, it's going to be really difficult for me to actually not only relate, but if we're talking about conscious relating, that's really difficult.
Mm.
You know, and it's not to say we can't do them at the same time, right? It's not to say
Yeah.
we like stop being in relationships until I figure my stuff out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely done that, for a period of time, and that, like, it's all right. It's not very fun, you know.
Mm.
It can be useful, um, but my point being that there is what I believe something intrinsic to the proportion of intimacy I can have with someone else to the intimacy I have with myself. And so more and more my work today is really the inner work.
Mm.
Especially when I'm working with men, it's really based around, you know, who are we as men? I believe today there's so many things. I feel like I'm going to go on a soapbox a little bit here, just to warn
No,
you.
no, no. Carry on.
I feel like there's so many ideas that are out there around what it's supposed to be, about what we're supposed to be as men. We see things, we're told things, we're shown things from people that are close to us, we're expected to be a certain way, all this stuff, right? Well, you know, if there's one thing that I know, or one thing that I do believe, is that as men, especially in a world that's trying to tell us how we're supposed to be,
Mm.
is that we really do get to choose how and what kind of man we want to be in the world.
Mm.
But here's the key. Here's what's important, is that we do, part of that is choosing. Because if we don't choose how I want to be, if I'm not intentional about that, then there's a really good chance that how I act, how I think, what comes through me is from society. It's a program from society. It's something that was given to me. It's something that was imprinted upon me. And there's a reason why there's so many people, men and women, but especially with men, that walk around feeling just a little bit disconnected, feeling like there's something not totally okay. And sometimes, and some of us may have the words for that. I may be able to describe my experience, like I feel
Sure.
strange,
Yeah.
right? But for most of us that weren't given the tools or the awareness of how to talk about our inner experience,
Mm.
I just feel weird. I'm gonna go do something about it. I'm gonna go, I don't know, hit something or drink something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it's like that's the pattern. So what's important is this: is that if we are choosing to have conscious relationships, we must choose to be conscious and intentional about our own relationship.
Mm.
And from that place, once we have that inner relationship, now I can come into an intentional relationship with someone else, knowing that what I'm bringing is me, or as me, as much of me as I can,
Sure.
that I'm in
Sure.
process with,
Sure.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And that is what leads. And if two people are doing the same thing, right, where they're coming to the table with their intention, with their vulnerability, with their authenticity, with their humanity,
Mm.
right, there's a lot of what I'll call soulful intimacy that can come from that. And
Mm.
it's the kind of intimacy that is, yeah, that I really believe that we're all innately seeking.
Mm.
Mm.
And I'm resonating really so much with what you're saying. It really starts with the individual, both men and women, really choosing what part of us would we like to show a lot more to ourselves and to others around us. And yeah, doing that inner work. So many people get into, this is what also happened in a couple of episodes before when we were talking about this, is people get into relationships because I feel that they're being a little bit pressured, society constructs and the expectations of, yeah, let's get into into relationship, and eventually get married, have children. Nobody really, I mean, not that many people, obviously we're in this kind of community, but not that many people talk about the inner work that each and every one of us should do before getting into a relationship, right? I kind of say this to some of my friends that there's like 3 stages of relationship, right? What was it? Codependent relationship with when 1 + 1 = 1.5, right? One is the codependent on the other. Then there's a independent relationship. 1 + 1 = 2. You have 2 people that are kind of sort of independent, let's say. But then you have a third stage, which is interdependent, when 1 + 1 = 11, right? You have your life and you've dealt with your inner work and you have a social circle and the same thing for you. But when we come together, just magic happens. And I think this is something that is not talked enough about. So I'm very grateful that you're doing this type of work, because it's so needed, man.
Yeah. And a lot of it's because it's what I needed, or what
Exactly,
I need.
right? Yeah.
Still need it.
Yeah. It's an ongoing dance, right? It's an ongoing journey.
Yeah. And to touch on, I feel like this may be relevant, but to touch on the men's work idea, you know, to me, that's in the same way as I'm working on myself so that I can come into relationship with others. In the same way as men, we can come together to do the work that I believe that there are things that a man can only learn from another man, just
Totally
like there
agree.
are, right? Well, let me take that back. Obviously, I can learn something from anyone, but there's a certain transmission that only comes from a man to a man, and that's what we're going after, right? That's really the thing. And same with women, right? There's something that gets passed through from a woman to another woman, right? That simply as a man I can't do, right? I can try to do it, I can give something that's similar, but in terms of a direct transmission, that's really something that can only come from another person. And that's really where I see the value, the true value of men's work coming in.
Yes.
Because it's in those spaces where we can really work through some of the things in a safe space, in a space that's I'm going to say that is appropriate for some of the things that as men we need to go through, so that once our space is a little clear, we can connect with the women. That's really something that I see as being kind of, maybe you'll resonate with this. I see this being kind of like men's, I'll say gender work, kind of 3.0, which is right now we have men and women doing very separate things. And the challenge is that a lot of what men's and women's groups, generally speaking, I mean, now there's definitely a little bit more of an evolution, but maybe like 5 years ago, they were very different. And there was not a lot of bridging. In fact, there was no bridging. It was like men are doing their stuff, women are doing their stuff, and we're kind of like still very much opposed. And really what I believe, and really what one of my visions for our future, where we're going, is yes, men and women need to have their separate spaces. They need to do their separate work. And as facilitators and as kind of leaders in this field, I think it's vital that we keep our vision on the next step, which is not just men doing their thing, women doing their thing, but how do we do this man thing and do this woman thing with the intention that at some point we're going to come together and sit in circle together.
There's going to be integration.
Yeah, that's really the next thing, the integration piece. And and part of that is that I think that when either side when there's too much trauma, or there's too much emotional debris, as you put it, that's kind of in the way, it's difficult to actually sit in a circle together and be present.
Yeah, it's difficult maybe to expect or to bring so much pain and work that was meant to be done by yourself alone into a group space, and kind of the community or the group kind of crumbles listening to all the pressure that you kind of maybe I'm not doing it justice by explaining it this way, but this is kind of a similar note that we touched on a couple of episodes prior as well. Is like when you bring so much trauma and work that you were meant to do by yourself, and you begin to kind of project it and push it out there to other people, the vibe changes quite a lot. I never really thought about it the way you're saying it, right? Relationship 3.0.
Mhm.
It kind of makes sense, right? We kind of start off is, well, we need to kind of be working our way through this, and because it's not really working, it's very dysfunctional to the point where separately we're doing this work together, and at some point we need to kind of come back into a whole. Interesting. Never really thought about it that way.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy for humans to kind of forget the script, as they say, and just kind of keep doing our thing.
Yeah.
But it's really that question is like, why are we doing that in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
It's, it, yeah.
I like what you said in the very beginning, that we're all here to walk each other home. That's really struck a chord with me. And I know it sounds very, very good, like to put it out there like a quote like this, but no, genuinely being able to embody that on a consistent basis with other people, with yourself, is no easy task. Maybe even in a lifetime you won't be able to achieve that, but that seems to me, the more I'm getting into this, the more I'm speaking to men and women, men like yourselves and other women as well, who are on this kind of conscious path. That seems to be the ultimate thing, right? We're all here for each other as a one big community, regardless of race, color, background, etc., etc. That seems to be a very, very worthy goal, to spend this, very, very short amount of time that we have on this earth.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
Let me ask you one kind of final question. Is there, because I'm sure we can go ahead and, like, for the next 4 or 5 hours talk about this, and maybe we need to revisit this. I think there's a lot of kind of words that we can open and kind of dive into.
Mm.
Um, is there actually, no, before we get to that, can you talk a little bit about the value of mentors and people that could, especially for men, can actually guide them into new new realms of possibilities, or uh, instilling that wisdom onto other generations? Did you had any mentors, and if so, what were kind of the uh, maybe some of the lessons that you learned from them?
So, it's funny. Whenever this topic comes up, the idea of mentorship, I always, oh yeah, I get angry. Yeah, like
Okay.
even right now, I can feel myself getting a little bit angry because, you know, at least just the life I had, right, the experience I had, as far as I can tell, I'll put it that
Mm.
way. I didn't not have too many opportunities for mentorship,
Mm.
right? And to me, mentorship is very connected, not necessarily, but to me, generally, it's very connected to elders,
Mm.
right? Like, like I mean, the definition of a mentor, I'm sure there's more, but it's like someone who has experience and wisdom who can who can share it to this person to help what they're doing be better, right? It's
Mm.
probably the simplest answer.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of that, and not necessarily, right? I mean, I could be mentored by someone younger than me about something specific, right? But in terms of life, in terms of being human, in terms of relating, in terms of how to be a man, all these kind of more existential questions, I believe, and I'm a little bit of an ageist, quite frankly. I believe that comes through experience and time.
Mm.
And traditionally, like traditionally, mentors were very specific, right? It was almost like an apprenticeship, right? It was like I
Yes.
wanted to
Yes.
learn something specific. I go to this person, he teaches me that thing, and that's it, right? That is the roles we're playing. That's how it works, right?
Mm.
And and typically, quite frankly, a lot of that had to do with age and experience, right? And so in times of old, there was a lot more um, preference given to elders and a lot more preference given to people who have experience doing whatever it is we want to do. I feel like today in our culture, we've kind of lost that a little bit.
Mm. Amen to
And
that.
so, yeah. And so, like, for example, myself, as an example, I grew up my entire life with no real time, again, as far as I can remember, right? With no real time where someone who was older, who I valued, who seemed like he had wisdom, I don't even think I had access to someone like that, let alone to have someone like that be like, hey, I can help you with this, right? And so what did I have? Or what did it end up being? Ended up getting, as we talked about, getting sold to, right? And a lot of times the idea of mentorship is a little bit, yeah, I don't believe it. I think it still has purity to it, the idea of mentorship. I think that a lot of times what we are getting, from courses or from webinars, things like that, it feels like something similar, but there's something very powerful, something very potent that comes through an intentional mentor-mentee relationship.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's a very valuable thing. I mean, as men, we have, again, as men, there's something we can transmute to others
Mm.
that is just intangible. And so, it's one of the things where, I mean, if it was an option, this was something I was planning on doing before I moved to Southeast Asia, was doing things like Big Brother programs, ways where as men we could be in a position, hopefully it's appropriate and hopefully like we've got some, accountability around it, responsibility around it, but where we can be in a position where we can mentor someone on how they can be and do better in their life. And again, I feel like I'm maybe going in a little bit of a different way here, but one of the most meaningful things that I believe a man can do is to mentor someone. Hopefully it's mentoring them in something that like comes from the heart, that is embodied, that's just kind of
Yeah,
coming out,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and even still, there is a lot of wisdom that someone who's in their 20s can pass on to someone who's in their teens,
Yeah.
and all the different levels. And so, yeah, whether it's called mentorship, whether it's called coaching or consulting or guidance or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's a lot to be said about experience. And you know, yeah, that's what I'll say
Mm.
about that.
Mm. I'm very grateful that we dove into this because this is such an important topic that is not really talked about enough. I think as boys, again from my experience, I've always had this kind of yearning for my manhood, even though I didn't know it at the times and I couldn't really verbalize it in a way. There is something special when you get touched by when you say you get touched, when you're in connection with an elder man who is willing to kind of guide you through wisdom and kind of through experience and kind of maybe push you a little bit into the unknown, and outside of your comfort zone, that is truly magical. I recently signed up to this mentorship course by Sacred Sons, so to
Mm,
mentor younger men like
mm,
teenage 11 to 19. I'm really excited for this, man. I think
nice, nice.
yeah, this is a way to give back. And I think we kind of lost a little bit of this elders. I spoke to Kevin Oros recently as well. He was kind of talking the fact that we've lost a little bit of the elders who are, initiating men into rites of passage, ushering them into manhood. Um, and it's really a shame because there's so much that we can learn from them about the old ways, right? Today, social media, and again, very nuanced perspective on these kind of things. But yeah, it's I think I think it's still in there because it's very innate in our DNA. But if it's not shown, if it's not properly guided, it could lead
Mm,
into this void, filling up with all kinds of demons.
mm, yeah,
If people can
yeah.
relate to this.
Mm.
Hmm.
Uh, I know we're kind of perhaps close to wrapping, but may I add another idea to
Please,
that?
please, please.
So part of the challenge that I see is that, and this is a bit of a generalization,
Hmm.
but part of the challenge is that the older generation, it's weird to say it that way, right? But like let's say men's work 1.0 and 2.0, you know, also had a lot of shadow,
Hmm.
right? And it's a lot of shadow that is just now coming out in the sense that a lot of it is kind of patriarchal. You know, a lot of the mentality around that is kind of sexist,
Mm,
right? Like, and so I say that to say that as men today, there's two things I believe that we can use to really guide us. I guess three things. Let me say three things. The first is, I guess the first and second are kind of the same. The first is an understanding of our values, right? Like I'm really getting into the idea of value driven living,
mm,
right? Because there's always going to be variables, always going to be stuff happening. There's always going to be something coming my way. And if I'm always only reacting to those things or responding to those things from what's happening in the moment, I don't actually have certainty that what I'm doing in that moment is connected to something that's meaningful to my heart.
mm.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm trying to process what you're saying and thinking, fuck, this is incredibly difficult to do, like consciously on an ongoing
Mm,
basis.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean
that's what it leads to, right? If you want to really evolve, that you're gonna hit challenges like that, which are good challenges.
yeah, which are good
Mm.
challenges, right? So we have our values. I guess the second thing again was kind of the same thing, which is we have our personal inner relationship,
Mm.
right? That's just our own inner knowing of our ness, right?
Mm.
And like knowing our heart, getting connected to perhaps spirit,
Relationship with ourselves, right? Okay,
yeah,
okay.
relationship with ourselves, right? Just that whole thing, right?
Mm.
And the third one, and this is one of the things I'm gonna guess you're gonna resonate with, is the idea of archetypes.
Mm.
So I really believe, again, I'm gonna say it again, that there is no, I don't think there is, nor there should be, nor will there be a definition of what it is a man's supposed to be. Right? I
Mm.
think that any of that, like a man's supposed to be this, man's supposed to be that, it's just all society. It's all essentially society marketing to us, trying to get us to buy into patriarchy, kind of, right?
Mm.
You know, and so we've got all this input coming in, and so archetypes to me, so it is true that there's no clear way of how we're supposed to be, and we all get to choose how we get to be, and archetypes seem to give us clues. They
Mm.
seem to give us clues as to certain ways and certain characteristics and certain ways of being that we can bring in and we can integrate into who I am. So, for example, we got the king, the warrior, the magician, lover, right? You know, one thing that I'm not sure that that's fully understood in terms of archetypes is that I'm not supposed to be the king. I'm not supposed to walk around and be like I am the warrior, I'm the king, right? It's not that.
Mm.
It's that the king archetype, the warrior archetype, carries a certain energy and a certain frequency,
Mm.
right? A certain kind of vibration. And the idea is that I, as an individual, also have a vibration,
Mm.
right? This is what's important. And the idea is that in each moment, based on what's appropriate, which hat I'm going to wear, I attune myself to that vibration. But I do that from my vibration,
Mm.
if that makes sense. So I'm never losing myself, right? I, Justin, am coming into the experience of the king vibration,
Mm. Mhm, mhm.
right? You see how it's happening. I'm not saying I'm going to be the king.
Yeah, that's a very. I think it's a very important distinction to make. So I don't mean to interrupt the flow, but when we say king, it's not a literal personification of you being the king, and this is kind of my kingdom. Although in some cases it could be. I don't know, but
Mm,
for the most part, it's just relating to that sovereign state of being and being able to see the wholeness from a very different perspective and being able to kind of give this fatherly energy, nurturing energy to whatever the kingdom, metaphorically speaking, needs, whether that's yourself, your body, your community, or your relationships, your community, etc., etc.
right, right. Yeah, and so it seems that we can use the idea of archetypes as almost like signposts, is a way of putting it. It's like there are things where if I'm walking along this path called life,
Mm.
I can just check. I can see where, okay, so that's where the king, this is what the king idea is. Where am I at in relation to that?
Mm.
And can I move myself? What parts of that are useful right now? How can I bring this in? And so I say that again in the context of, it's important to be in connection with other men.
Mm.
It's important to be in connection in brotherhood and to sit in circle. I think it's extremely vital as men.
Mm.
And it's important to do that with discernment because, and I mean, I feel like there's a part of me that resists having to say this, but it's real. We live in 2020, 2021. The world's kind of strange, right? There's a marketing entity that's kind of in the world trying to get people to buy and do stuff and like to lose themselves in something that they can attain,
Mm.
right? And so, like you spoke to, it does take vigilance. It does take vigilance and awareness and discernment. And again, it's not like we don't have any idea what to do. We do. We have archetypes that, again, seem to point towards something that, at least for me, feels right. Right, and that's really what it comes down to. Does it feel like it feels good?
Mm-hmm.
If it does, walk towards that.
Mm.
And if it doesn't, then let it go. In fact,
Yeah.
anything that's said here, right? It's like this is just I'm just a guy on a screen in Thailand
Mm.
talking about some stuff, right?
Mm.
Your truth is your truth, and part of the work is uncovering your truth, knowing that that process more likely not will take work.
Mm.
And that's really that evolution, and really that's where we can ask ourselves, as a person, like, why am I here? And it's that three stages thing, right? Am I just here for myself? It's kind of the fourth stage, right? The zero stage. Am I just here for
Mm-hmm.
me? And like,
Yeah.
that's cool for a little bit,
Yeah.
but I believe as men, we naturally start evolving into more awareness and more desire to be, to be a contribution and things like that. And that's where I believe folks, men like you and I, and other people like Kevin who are doing this kind of men's work, who are creating the the literal support network, but also the kind of energetic weaving for humanity around
Yes.
this thing. That's really where we're able to come together and yeah, create a bit more harmony and
Mm.
balance between everyone.
Oh man, I'm listening to this. I'm getting goosebumps. I, yeah, I resonate with everything you're saying. Like you're speaking to a very deep part of me that um, before was very neglected, and now it's kind of slowly coming out. And like, oh, okay, is this safe to come out? And um, no, I totally agree with this. I mean, we can have a separate episode just on archetypes and how that manifests in our lives, and yeah, we can get into there's a great book by King Warrior Magician Lover by what was it? Man, I can't remember the guy's name now. Type in King Warrior Magician Lover, and then you see the first one. Was it Gillette? I can't remember
Dan
now.
Gillette, and I want to say Robert Moore, but I'm pretty sure that's
Robert
wrong.
Moore. That's it.
Is it Robert Moore?
I think so.
Oh,
Yeah. I think so.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So go check this one out. I think it's gonna blow your freaking mind. I think I personally read it or listened to it because it's audio. I have it in audio format 5 or 6 times. Every single time something new comes up, and I'm getting deeper and deeper and deeper into really trying to understand it, but also really make futile attempts to actually embody that, because it's an ongoing journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just as a plug for King Warrior Magician Lover, if you're a man who's maybe watching this and you're kind of like in this inquiry of what it means to be a man, that is the book. That is the book that I would highly recommend starting out with, because so what that book represents for me is, if you ever been to like a mall or like an amusement park or something, there's like a map, right? And like the map is this, and then it's got like a little pin. It's like you are here, right?
Wow.
Right? And if I'm standing at the map, because I know I'm here, if I want to go there, I go in this direction, right? Well, for me, reading that book, told me where I was on the map very clearly, right? Like, but the thing was, I thought it was here, but the map was like, no, 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 you're over here, right? And so, right, so it was confronting because it was so like it's a healthy dose of reality. It's like a healthy reality
Yes.
check.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the reason why I say it's healthy is because it was confronting because I was like, oh man, I thought I was like a little bit better, but no, I'm like
Mm.
shit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But here's the thing: unless I actually know where I am, nothing I do is going to actually get me where I want to go,
Mm.
right?
That's a
Like
reality everybody must face. Like if you're on this
it's a
path, you
reality
have
in
to.
real space, right?
Mm.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, to use the mall analogy again, right? It's like if I think I'm on the third floor and the store I want to go to is on the second floor,
Mm.
so I think that if I go down one floor, I'm going to get to that place.
Mm.
But the reality is I'm on like the fifth floor, right? So I go to fifth floor, I go down one floor, I'm on the fourth
Mm.
floor, I'm walking around confused.
Mm.
I'm like,
Mm.
why is this not working? Why does
Yeah.
this not right? And it's simply because where I started from, where I thought I started from, is not where I was. So
Mm.
yeah, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, highly recommend that. I'm actually planning on doing it's going to either be a webinar series or maybe like a group process around that book because yeah, I mean, even if it's just a book club, that's the kind of book that is so relevant and so useful and practical. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's there's a reason why the book is like usually recommended for this kind of
So
stuff.
yeah, it's timeless principles there. It's a wisdom that stood the test of time because it's universal, right? The more personal something is, the more universal it is. That's one of those books where, yeah, it's gonna be time well spent. Let's put it this way. We're kind of hyping it up, but by all means, go and check it out yourself, and then see what that does for you.
Yeah, and
Um,
I
mhm.
just want to I just want to throw in one more thing, just a little thing with the with the age that we're in is that to be very clear, the idea of king, warrior, magician, lover may not resonate for everyone. It is a very um, it is a certain flavor of that. So if you're someone who hears those words and those words don't resonate with you, because it is, you know, let's say king, warrior, magician, lover, it's a bit white, you know, so it may not resonate with you. And at the same time, across cultures and across generations, again, it seems that there are archetypes that are, if not interchangeable, very similar,
Mm.
right? So, for example, in the maybe more Asian cultures, instead of a king, we have an emperor,
Yes.
right? Which is slightly different but similar. Instead of a warrior, we have a samurai, right? Instead of a magician, we have a sage. So again,
Mm.
let the words be the words. Read it with your own personal discernment and how you'll interpret it, and also know that it's a good book.
Mm. Mm.
It's good. It's a good one.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, don't necessarily judge a book by its cover, yeah, because like you said, there's multiple interpretations. Maybe they use King War Magician Love because it's recognized more. Also, because I think that both of the authors are actually Americans in the US. So, but yeah, there is cross cultural references there. So yeah, don't judge by a book by its cover. But let's put it this way. All right. Justin, before we wrap up, I have a question that I normally ask my guests. Is there one question that you wish I would have asked you that I didn't?
Mm. What comes up for me, or just what's coming up, is what's hard about being a man.
Mm. What
And I
is
think
hard
it's not.
about being a man?
Yeah, fucking everything.
How much time do we have?
Oh, it's funny. So to me, that and I can definitely answer the question, no problem. But to me, that question is more. It's more the experience of answering the question than to me, what's more important is the experience of answering that question.
Mm.
as opposed to the actual content. You know, in the sense that we are in a stage in the world where it's still difficult, and not only difficult, but it's actually very rarely is there actually space and permission for men to talk about our stuff, why it's hard. There's, I mean, obviously we can talk about why it's great too, right? But to talk about why it's hard is something that I I believe is can be an access point to the kind of evolution and the growth that we're seeking. You know, because until I can really admit to myself what's difficult about my experience, then it's difficult for me to actually do something about it, for one. But second of all, because it's still difficult, whether I express it or not, it's still difficult. But when I don't talk about it, it just kind of sits and it kind of does this thing. It kind of just, you know, kind of just rattles in the cage. And that is, I think we touched on this earlier, you know, that tends to result in people kind of acting out, being weird, not knowing how to be at ease, you know, not knowing quite how to connect, all this stuff. So yeah, you know, having a more 360 experience and being able to express and to share that, and you know, being able to express like what's hard is something that, again, being able to express something along those within that realm that requires vulnerability, introspection, and authenticity. Those three things are also the three things that, as men, when we bring them into relationship, not necessarily just with women, just in relationship, that's the kind of quality that's the kind of quality that I believe that our relationships desire, and also what the world needs for men right now.
Wow, beautifully put. Amen to that, brother. Ho, ho.
Yeah.
Ho. Wow. Justin, if people want to learn a little bit more about you, I'm sure this message is going to resonate with a lot of people. Where can they find a little bit more about your work and your message?
Yeah. Easiest place would be www.soulfulintimacy.com. If you'd like to learn more specifically about the men's side of things, you can jump on the soulfulman.com. I always wondered, I always worried I was going to say the social man at some point. You know, that's a pickup website, right?
I
Don't go
didn't even know.
there. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Don't go to social. Go to soulfulman.com. That was like the worst plug ever. So yeah,
Oh man, so good.
check that out. Yeah, so check that out. Yeah, I'm gonna be running some more events, some group courses, and you know, of course, Facebook. Feel free to check me out there. A lot of writings and a lot of content is put out on there as well. And Soulful Intimacy page, personal page as well. So
amazing. I mean, I've personally been to Justin's men's circles, and this was a couple of years ago. This is when I actually really started into this to be more active. So I can only imagine how better things have become since that. So with all the wisdom and all the skills and the tools that you've learned along the way. So definitely go check this out. Man, it's been a great conversation. Thank you very much for that. Any final words before we wrap up?
Love.
Okay. We finished.
Love ourselves so we can love others, and so the world feels love. Gosh, that sounds so terrible. My goodness.
Oh man, I think it's good. People, for some people, it's gonna resonate. For some people, it may kind of trigger them. But that's usually. I read this quote recently saying, "Oh, this person is triggering me. Therefore, I need to understand him better." So hopefully, they take down this. They take this path. Put it this way.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out.